Hello, welcome to Zigmatech Learning Hub. I'll be your instructor for geography. For this class, we are going to be taking our exercises from the Examguide app. If you don't have the application already installed on your device, I will want you to download the app in order to follow along in this class. Examguide is a leading educational app that helps students prepare adequately for various exams like UTME, post-UTME, WAEC, GCE, KCPE, IJMB, JUPEB, Calbepedia, BECE, JSCE, NCEE, NECO, etc. You can download the app from www.examguide.com or Google Play Store. Please subscribe to our channel and turn on the notification bell to be updated on new videos. Ready for today's class? Okay, let's get started. Hello, welcome back. So in today's lesson, we'll be looking at plateaus and lowlands. And what we have in store for today's lesson is that we are going to look at the major types of plateau we have. Then we are going to look at the characteristics and processes of these plateaus. And we'll also look at the lowlands we have and the meaning of lowlands. Then we'll look at the characteristics of the different lowlands we have in the world. And also we are going to look at the formation of some of these lowlands, example, the plains. And then we'll look at the importance and benefits of plateaus and lowlands to man. So in the previous lesson on mountains, we talked about landforms, and I said that landforms are actually physical features with shape in our physical environment, or any physical feature that has a shape that is found in the physical environment in landform. And we mentioned examples of landforms like mountains, plateaus, valleys, waterfall, lowlands. So today we are going to look at one of these landforms, and what we are going to consider today is what is the lowland and the plateau. So what is a plateau? What is a plateau? A plateau is actually derived from a French word, and it means table land. So we can define a plateau as an elevated upland that has a fairly level surface, and the sides of that upland descends steeply into the surrounding lowland. So a plateau is simply an elevated upland with a fairly level surface in which the sides of that upland descends steeply into the surrounding lowlands. And plateau are actually referred to as table lands. So a plateau is different from a mountain in such a way that the top of the plateau is usually flat, while the sides are steep in appearance or in nature. As you can see on the screen, we have an example of what a plateau looks like. Here we have a flat surface, and the sides are actually steep down to the surrounding lowlands or river we have around that environment. So what are the types of plateaus we have? We basically have the tectonic plateau. We have the Intermont or the Intermontane plateau, we have the volcanic plateau, and we have the dissected plateau. So we have four basic types of plateau. So let's look at them one after the other. So we consider the first type of plateau, which is called the tectonic plateau. Now, these plateaus are actually caused by the movement within the Earth's crust. And these movements, they actually cause the land to be uplifted to a uniform height or a uniform altitude. And a typical example of a tectonic plateau is the Deccan Plateau in India. Then in parts of Africa, eastern parts of Africa like Kenya, Tanzania, and the rest, we have different tectonic plateaus there. And also in South Africa, we have a whole lot of tectonic plateau found around such region. So this is Deccan Plateau in India, and as you can see, the plateau is formed as a result of elevation, or will I say upliftment of the land by the Earth's movement to a considerable altitude or height, So this is how the plateau looks like when you get to India. Now, the second type of plateau is called the Intermontane Plateau or the Intermont Plateau. Now, the Intermont Plateau is actually found in places where we have mountain ranges, and not just mountain ranges, but fold mountains. So it's a type of plateau that is formed between two or more fold mountains. So when the movement of the Earth's crust is such that it produces an elevated upland in between fold mountains, such elevated upland is actually referred to as an intermontane plateau or an intermont plateau. Now, a typical example of an intermont plateau is the plateau we have close to the Black Sea, and it's called the Anatolian Plateau. So the Anatolian Plateau is found in ranges of fold mountain. So this is a typical illustration of how an intermont plateau is formed. When we have ranges of mountain here, just like the Rocky Mountain, the Colorado Mountain, for instance, in the American continent, then we have the Pacific ranges. Now, if we have an elevation, caused by the movement below the Earth, now that elevation is actually referred to as an intermont plateau. So we have this intermont plateau formed here between the Rocky Mountain and the Pacific ranges. So just take note that whenever a plateau is in between two fold mountains, that plateau is actually called an intermont plateau or an intermontane plateau. So we look at the next type of plateau. The next one is called the volcanic or lava plateau. Now, as we all know, when we talk about volcanoes or lava, we're actually talking about the ejection of magma below the Earth's crust through a vent to the surface. Now, if this ejection, is such that it gives rise to the formation of a tableland, we call such a plateau a volcanic or a lava plateau. So examples of a volcanic plateau is the one we have in Borno State, that is the Biu Plateau in Borno State. Then we have the Antrim Plateau in Ireland, we have the Snake Plateau in Colombia, and we have the Ethiopian Plateau in eastern part of Africa. So this is a typical illustration of how a volcanic plateau is formed. As you can see, we have ejection of hot lava from the Earth's crust. Now, when this lava solidifies in such a way that it gives rise to the formation of a tableland as we have here, this tableland is referred to as as a volcanic plateau, and they take the appearance of an igneous type of rock. So the next plateau is known as the dissected plateau. Now, when we say dissect, we're actually talking about trying to cut something out or to carve out something. So a dissected plateau is a plateau that is formed when uplands or highland areas have been carved out by agents of denudation. When we have a highland area being carved out by running water, or carved out by ice, or carved out by wind, the remnant or the structure that is left is called a dissected plateau. And examples of these dissected plateaux includes the Futajalon Highland of Guinea, which supplies River Niger and River Benue with its source of water. Then we have the Kumasi Plateau in Ghana. Then we have the extreme edges of Jos Plateau in Plateau State. So these are some examples of a dissected plateau. As you can see, this is a plateau that is carved out here. This is a typical example of a dissected plateau, and it's been caused as a result of the action of running water. And it's Futajalon Plateau, to be precise, in Guinea. As you can see, this plateau here is actually disturbed or acted upon by the action of running water. And in places where we have dissected plateau, there's actually a tendency for us to have things like running water or glacier, around such a particular place. So what are the characteristics or the features of these plateaus? Now, the first feature is that plateaus, they actually have a level uplands. Their tops are actually flat compared to a mountain that has a peak and a steep side. But if you look at the plateaus, their top or their peak are actually flat, or flat in nature. Then the sides of the plateau are also steep, and sometimes plateaus are actually dissected or carved by rivers and streams, and we also refer to plateaus as tablelands. Then another feature or characteristics of plateau is that the uplands, they have more or less uniform surfaces. You go to some plateaus, you look at their surface, they're actually uniform. Then you go to some other plateaus and you look at the surface of that plateau, they have less uniformity around the regions of such a plateau. So these are some of the features that you can see when you go to a place we have a plateau. So what are the relevance or the importance of plateau? Why is it that plateaus are important to us? Number one is agriculture. Now, since we know that plateaus, have an extensive, upland surface, it definitely means that regions where we have plateaus can be used for agriculture due to their nature. So we can actually carry out, production of crops, in places where we have plateaus. And also, in terms of tourism, plateaus are actually, used as tourist centers, like the Biu Plateau in Borno State or the Jos Plateau in Plateau State. These places are actually, centers for, sightseeing, where people go to, look at the beauty of the environment, look at the type of climate we have there, and look at the type of crops or vegetation that that is found in such a particular place. So plateaus are very good in terms of being a center for tourism. Also, for dissected plateaus where we have rivers, carving out, or rivers, gushing out from such a particular region, these dissected plateaus can as well be used as a source of hydroelectric power supply. Like, let's take for instance the Futajalon Plateau, to be precise, the Guinea Highlands. Now, this Futajalon Highland is the chief source of hydroelectric power supply for the Kainji Dam in New Busa. So you see that plateau can actually generate water from its peak to supply electricity for the neighborhood. And also, in terms of animal rearing, plateaus are actually a good place where we can rear our livestock and our cattle, because they have they have a vegetation where pastures can be found. So it's a very good place where you can take your animal to for grazing, or you can use for livestock rearing. And in terms of the nature of a plateau, we can use it for for settlement purposes. It definitely means that people can as well can as well live on plateaus just as they do on lowland areas. Now, a good example of settlements on plateau is the Jos Plateau. Now, if you go to Jos, to be precise, you see that people live there on those plateau regions. That's to say that the plateau supports settlement, and most plateaus, especially plateaus that are actually gotten from volcanic origins, are actually a source of minerals for man. And the nature or the height of or the relief of a plateau will always give rise to the formation of what we call relief rainfall. So the climate of a plateau differs because it's found on a highland area. So as a result of that, we'll tend to have a cool climate or a Mediterranean type of climate in these plateau regions. And what are the problems or the disadvantages of plateau? Number one is that because of the nature of plateau, where we have plateaus surrounded by escarpments and cuestas, or plateaus surrounded by fold mountains, because of this, we always have the issues of inaccessibility. So we have cases where it's very difficult to get access to a particular plateau because of the features surrounding them. And also, plateaus can affect construction networks like roads, like railway, and also communication networks. And the nature of a plateau, which the sides are steep, can cause what we call soil erosion, because when we have plateaus and we have water flowing down, it's going to cause erosion to the surrounding lowlands. And also the issue of aridity in places like deserts, dryness, or plateaus that are found in deserts, they actually pose a great problems. For instance, the stony deserts and the sand, stony desert to be precise, places where we have plateaus in this desert, they actually affect the landscape of such a particular place. Now, let's go over to the next type of landform, which is called the lowland. So, basically, if you look at the mountains and the plateaus, they are actually highland areas. They actually extend, beyond 300 meters from the sea level. Now, any height that is way above 300 meters from the sea level is actually a highland. But for lowlands, they are seen as a land area that does not exceed 300 meters from the sea level. Now, the sea level is actually used as a reference point. So, if this is the sea level and we have a height of 300 meters, any land within this height is actually referred to as as a lowland. But any land height that extends above this level is seen as as a highland area. So we have a typical example of what a lowland area is, as you can see on your screen, and we have a series of lowlands in Nigeria. So let's look at the areas of lowlands in Nigeria. Now, the first the lowest of all the lowlands area in Nigeria is the Niger Delta lowlands, and it ranges from a height of 0 to 100 meters high. Then if you look at the Cross River Basin, the Cross River Basin extends from a height of 120 meters from the sea level to 180 meters from the sea level. Then we have the coastal plain of the southeastern part of Nigeria. We have the coastal region of the western part of Nigeria. We have the Chad Basin in the northeastern part of Nigeria. And we also have the Niger-Benue Trough ranging from the western part of Nigeria to the eastern part of Nigeria down to the southern part of Nigeria. And it has a height of 100 meters to 300 meters from the sea level. We also have the Sokoto Basin in the northwestern part of Nigeria, having a height range of 200 meters to 300 meters high. So these are some of the lowland areas we have in Nigeria. When you compare them to some of the highlands we also have in Nigeria. So what are the types of lowlands we have in Nigeria? Now the first type of lowland is called a valley. Then we also have the coastal regions. Then we have the plains. So basically we have three major types of lowlands: the valley, the coastal regions, and the plain. As you can see on the screen, this is a typical example of a valley, and this is also a typical example of a plain or a coastal area. So let's look at the valley. Now, a valley is simply an area of land that is found between two highlands, or you can say a lowland that is found between two mountains or two hills or two plateaux. Now, a river can be a valley can be a dry valley, or can be a wet valley or a river valley. Now, when a river flows through a valley or a lake flows through a valley, it is seen as a wet valley or a river valley. But when there is no water flowing through that valley or valley lowland, we call it a dry valley. So what's on your screen is just an illustration of what a dry valley looks like and what a river valley looks like. So let's look at the coastal region. Now, when we talk about the coastal region, we're actually talking about any lowland area that is near or beside a river or a lake or a sea or even an ocean. So an area of land that is found close to places where we have these water bodies are actually called a coastal region. And we have them in the Niger Delta parts of Nigeria, and also in the southern parts of the west, and also in the southern part of the east of Nigeria. So the next one is called a plains. Now, it's called plain. Now, a plain is an extensive area of lowland. And when I say extensive, it is usually very wide and long. And they usually have a fairly level, undulating, or tilted topography, meaning that the level of steepness is very low, and the topography is actually tilted in a kind of way. So what are the characteristics of valley? What are the features of valley? Now, if we know that the valley is simply a lowland between two highlands or mountains or plateau, then we should understand that valleys are actually formed by forces, tensional or compressional forces, just as we've seen in the block mountain, where a rift valley is formed from a tensional force. It definitely means that most valleys are actually formed from compressional or tensional forces. And the bottom of a valley is usually flat, and the sides of a valley is usually steep. And valleys are actually caused by vertical movements, large scale, lateral and vertical movements within the earth crust. And they are caused as a result of faulting or cracking. And most times a valley may be dry, and sometimes a valley may be wet. A valley is wet if it contains river, and is dry when it doesn't. So these are some of the characteristics of valleys. Then we look at coastal areas. What are the features or what are the characteristics of coastal areas? coastal areas are actually extensive areas of lowland. That's one thing we should know. And also, such areas, are very rich in silt, gravel, clay, and, alluvial soils that can be found around there. And these places are actually very good or conducive for agricultural purposes, and it can serve as a residential area or for industrial uses due to the presence of water. And one thing about coastal areas is that coastal areas sometimes may be marshy, sometimes may be swampy, or sometimes may be muddy, or sometimes may be forested if it's found in a rainforest belt. And also, these coastal areas can form villages, towns, local governments, and cities. And they can as well be converted to tourist centers. Now, let's look at how lowlands are formed. Lowlands are actually formed, due to movement within the Earth's crust. Now, initially, the Earth's surface is actually meant to be on the sea level. But if we have, forces within the Earth's crust, acting on the Earth's crust, causing the Earth's crust to, elevate itself, then it will definitely give rise to what? Rise to a lowland formation. Now, this stress, will finally cause an upliftment or lowering of the earth crust. So we can as well say that lowlands are formed when these tensional forces or compressional forces, cause an uplifting or a lowering of the land. So this is how lowlands are actually made. So we have plains, types of plains, and there are basically 3 types of plains. Remember, we talked about valley, we talked about plains, and we talked about coastal regions. So for plains, we have 3 types. So we are going to look at the 3 types of plains one after the other. So we start with the structural plains. Now, these ones are actually caused when the surface, is undisturbed horizontally. So as you can see here, this is a typical example of a structural plane. As you can see, the surface, it is looking undisturbed horizontally. So that type of plane is referred to as a structural plane land. Then planes that are actually caused by agents of denudation, when we have running water acting on it, we have ice or glacier or even waves acting on it. Such, plain land is actually called an erosional plain land. Now, this is a typical example of what an erosional plain land looks like. As you can see, the places are not uniform as a result of the lowering of some of the portion of the land found around here by agents of denudation. So there are basically different 5 types of erosional plain. We have a peneplain, we have the pediplain, and we have the reg, and we have the lowest plain, and we also have a plain that is actually caused by action of ice. So we call that the ice-cored plain. Now, a plain is called a peneplain when the level is fairly, undulating. We call it a peneplain. But an erosional plain that is, caused when denudation has acted on a highland, causing it to, slope down or lower down. Such erosional plain is called a pediplain, and that feature, that result is called a pediment. So when such plain, forms, we call that plain a pediment. Then we have erosional plains in the desert region that is rocky in nature. We call it the reg erosional plain. Then the sandy erosional plain is actually referred to as the lowest plain. Then the erosional plain that is caused by the action of ice is referred to as the ice-scarred plain. Then we look at the depositional type of plain. Now, as the word deposition denotes, this type of plains are actually formed when we have what sediments or deposits carried by river or by ice or by wave from its source to that destination. So we call depositional plains plains of accumulation, because we have different sediments or different debris or materials being transported to that spot. So we have different types of depositional plains. The first is the flood plains. We have the alluvial plains, we have the deltaic plains, we have the outwash plain, we have the lacustrine plain, we have the coastal plain, and we have the aeolian plain. So we are going to look at them one after the other. The flood plain is a plain that is formed from deposition of materials carried from the upper course of a river to the lower course of a river. And they actually formed when these sediments being transported from that region to this region, accumulates at the end point. And some of these sediments can be gravel, or can be silt, or can be clay. Then we have the alluvial plain. Now they are formed when they are just formed like the flood plains, and they are formed when sediments, such as gravel, sand, silt, and clay are also transported from the upper course of a river down to the lower course of a river. But one key thing about the alluvial plain is that they are rich in an alluvial type of soil. So the next type of plain is the deltaic plain. Now, deltaic plain are found out at the mouth of a river. So when we have a river in its lower course trying to offload its sediments in order to empty into the ocean, we have the formation of a deltaic plain around such a particular place. Then we have a type of plain that is formed by the action of ice. We call that type of plain the outwash plain. Then the lacustrine plain are actually formed by the deposition of sediments in places where we have dry lakes or dry valley. Then the coastal plains are plains that are formed when we have deposition of sediments by the coastal waves around the coastal region. Then for the aeolian plain, that one is actually seen in the desert, where we have the wind, the aeolian, blowing particles, and these particles are actually deposited somewhere else. So when this wind blow these particles, the accumulation is seen as as an aeolian type of plain. So what are the importance of lowlands? Number one is that lowlands are good for human habitation. As we can see, most places we live in Nigeria are actually lowland areas. And some plains are actually rich in mineral resources like crude oil, limestone, coal, and clay. And also there's presence of a rich fertile soil that is rich in humus and also very good for cultivation. And lowlands supports good communication network. That's why we see it's very easy to build communication networks like road, railways on lowland areas compared to highland areas. And also rearing of animals is made possible on lowland areas, and the rivers that flow through these areas are actually a source of domestic and industrial application. So we also have majority of population found in the lowland areas compared to the highland areas. So what are the problems that we can link with the plain lowlands? Now, some plains are actually affected by flood. Some plains, they pose a barrier to communication because of these flood. And places where we have issues of flooding in the coastal plains or the flood plains, they actually hinder construction activities, they actually hinder transportation activities. So as a result of this, you spend more money in building, things like bridges, flyovers, just to overcome such a barrier. And in plains that are outwash in nature, or we have the lacustrine plain, these plains are actually not very favorable for production of crops. And some plains in deserts are actually situated in places where we have a harsh climate. Also, some plains are not, safe in times of war, because there will be no place for you to hide. And some of these places, will not give you a good defensive facility. So let's quickly look at the Examguide app. Let's go to 2010 SSCE. We look at question. Let's go to 2010 SSCE, and let's look at some questions. Let's possibly look at question number 4. Okay, now question number 4. It says, what is a plateau? What is a plateau? Now, as we've seen a plateau as what? As an elevated upland with a fairly flat surface and the sides sloping to the surrounding lowlands. So a plateau is just a tableland with a flat top and a steep sides that steeply slopes to the surrounding lowlands. And the next question says, list 2 types of plateau. We have the volcanic plateau, we have the dissected plateau, we have the tectonic plateau, and the rest. So these are some examples of plateaus we have. Thank you for participating in today's class. You can practice more questions using the Examguide app. The app scores and gives a detailed explanation of all the questions at the end of your practice test. You can learn a particular topic of interest with different modes like study mode, mock mode, and practice mode. It also has other features that make learning fun. It's a must-have for all serious students. Download from www.examguide.com if you don't have it yet. See you in the next class. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel, hit the notification bell, and share the videos to people that will benefit from it. Bye.